is, so the user is just getting one physical page, that is the index.html page. And then when he routes, he is not going from index.html to say employee.html or add employee.html. What's actually happening is the DOM is being updated and Angular is handling the rendering of the UI by looking at the address bar in where we change the URL of our address bar. Now, to work with routing in Angular, we need to use the router module of Angular. So we know that in order to work with different components in Angular or different uh, components and libraries in Angular, we need to import modules in our app root module. So here, to work with routing, we need to import the app routing module. So we need to import the app routing module that was created during the project setup when we created our startup template. And this app routing module, you can find it here. So just the way we created shared modules, uh, the Angular CLI, when you generated the startup template, it created the app routing module. And what app routing module is doing is it's importing router module. And it's the router module that handles routing in Angular for us. And what we are doing is telling the router module to go ahead and use a function for route and then register the routes that we are declaring in this array. Essentially, we can do this as well. We can copy this from here and directly register it in our imports array here. But this way, what will happen is that we'll have a little convoluted app module. Just to reorganize our code, the Angular CLI separated this uh, custom module for us so that working with routes is a bit cleaner for us.
So Salim, one quick question. Routing means going from one page to another page. Is that what it means?
Yes, Samir. So routing, as I said, in Angular, we don't have any physical routing. That means the user is not going from index.html page to say employees.html page. He is staying in the same index.html page, but when he clicks on say a link that takes him from one page to another page, the DOM, the HTML gets updated, and it appears to him that as if the page has changed.
Okay, okay. So the container, somehow the container has a new view or a new set of HTML statements, which corresponds to the next page or next view. Is that what's going on?
Yes, Samir. So
Okay.
when the container changes its view, we call it as the DOM being updated, the
Okay.
document object module being updated.
And that is routing. Going when you refresh the container, put another set of HTML, and we are trying to understand how that happens in Angular. Correct? Is that correct?
Correct, correct,
Okay.
Samir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So if you guys could look into the code snippet here, in order to work with routing, we will need multiple components. That's how we will go from one component to the other component. So what we will do is we will quickly create two new components, and we will do it using the Angular CLI. And the command is ng, G is for generate, C is for component, and I'll place it under employee folder. That's why I typed employee and then the forward slash and then our component name. So I'm creating a new component by the name of add employee, and this created a new component for us inside the employee folder. And now I'll create another component so that we have at least two components for us to uh, to handle routing. I'll use the same command now, ng. that is for Angular CLI. G is for generate, C is for component, and it will be inside the same folder employee. And then this will be just the employee to show the employee list that we have been showing till now in the home component. So if you see, this has created both the add employee component and the employee component. If you look inside, you will have employee component TypeScript file, HTML file, and the CSS file. So now to tell Angular that we want to go from one page to another page, or from one component to another component, we use an attribute directive that is router link. And I'll quickly add this unlisted and listed portion to our home component. And if you're following along, you can copy it from the first code snippet. Just copy this portion, UL and LI, and paste it inside line number 7 and replaced it. So what we did is we added a router link attribute to our anchor tag, and we named it as employees and add employees. And we said that, okay, you have to append the URL with the employee text, and for add employee you have to append the URL using the add employee. So now if I quickly run my application, and we are doing it in the home component.html, which we have been working till now. Okay, I believe my application is already running, so I can go to my browser and hit refresh. Now if I click on this add employee, you will see the browser's URL change. I'll just restart my server. So what we did essentially is for this anchor tag, we are saying that now whenever a user clicks it, change the URL with the employee suffix in this case. So this by now. Okay, let's.
Don't you need to update the routes?
Not yet. Uh, we do not need to update the routes because it will just use the routing. The Angular till now will not be able to handle it, but our URL should be updated. So it's showing up here. If you can see in the bottom portion here, that okay. Yeah, we need to update. You're correct. We need to update it because it's picking up the default route and it's redirecting us back to the home component. So I'll just quickly update these two routes. So what we did essentially is inside our route array, we are passing a set of objects here. So what it expects is the path. Path is the name that we want our URL to be appended with, and the component that we want it to render. So if I go ahead and import employee component and add employee component,
Could it be because your
Mhm.
employee
Yeah,
you used lowercase? When you created the second one, you used uppercase. I was going to ask about it, but I figured that
yeah,
maybe it just didn't matter.
yeah. It mattered. It mattered. Yeah. So
Okay,
I'll just quickly
apparently
delete
it
it.
did matter.
Yeah, but it mattered in sense of finding the path. So I'll just quickly add one more. So I'll just create it on the root for now. Okay. So now we should be able to import it. Yep. So if I go to my browser, just give me 1 second.
Do you need to declare this
Yep, we need
component? Yeah.
actually we changed this so our app module is no longer able to find it. We'll just need to import it freshly and we should be good. Yeah. So you can see when I click on employees, our URL is being updated. And when I click on add employee, our URL is now updated. So this is how we use router link to uh, append our URLs and to navigate. So we have registered our routes and then you can see uh, till now we are just displaying the home component.ts. We are not navigating to the actual employee or the actual add employee component. And if you look into the HTML of employee component, it says employee works, and the same in case of add employee. So to let or to let Angular know, or in order for Angular to render this components, when we change the route, we need to use something called the router outlet. But before we do that, what we will do is we will organize our code a little bit. So we'll go to our home component and we'll say that okay, our home component will now only be responsible for handling the navigation. So what I'll do is I'll quickly copy all the table where we are rendering our data from the backend and put it in the employee component page. Remove it here. So what will happen now is our employee component will not work because it has some functions that it needs. So what I can do is I can go to the home component and just copy the code that is inside our home component class. So if you can see, I'm in home component class, I'm copying all the properties and functions so that employee component now has all of it. It will have some missing references, the employee model. I'll import the employee model and the employee service that we built yesterday. Okay, so now it's building. And if we look at our page, you will see the home component is now just rendering the navigation. And in real world applications, this is what we do. The home component or the app root component is where we'll place our navigation and the sidebar. And our actual pages which we will be working will be here. So when we click add employee, the add employee component will render. And we click employees, the employee component is render. And it's not rendering right now because we are missing a crucial part, and that is an attribute, oh sorry, a directive, a built-in directive by the name of router outlet. So now what Angular's route module will do is it will look into the URL first. Say here, when the when the URL changes and add employee is added, the router module will go ahead and replace the router outlet with the component that we want to show. And it does that by looking into our array of routes. So here router module sees that the URL is now add employee. It goes ahead and replaces the router outlet, or I should say renders the route add employee component where we have added the router outlet component tag or directive in our case. Yeah. And now if we go and look in our page, here we can see we are now in the employees page and add employee page. So we have reorganized our application till now. Like before we were only working with our home component. Now we have home component which sits as the root in terms of rendering our UI, showing the common things which we need to show on all the pages. For example, the header, navigation bar, we can add sidebar navigation, and we can also include footer in our home component, and then the other components will be rendered inside the router outlet. We have seen how we can use router link attribute to navigate, and we can also navigate using our code base. That is, uh, we can navigate from our TypeScript code. So to navigate from our TypeScript code, what I'll do is I'll add a small button in our add employee HTML. So what it says that it tells us to go back, and we have a go back method here, and I'll just add the go back method in my add employee component. And to work with routing inside our TypeScript, we need to use the router class, and we have to inject it in our constructor, and we can import it now. And the router class is available in Angular router library. And here you can see I'm saying that this dot route using the navigate function and passing the path the same way as we did in our router link attribute. It's now
Samir, yesterday we used event emitter to communicate, right?
emitter to communicate from child component to parent component.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is within the same component. Okay.
No, this is different component, but here we are we are not transferring data. What we are
Okay.
saying is that we are going from one component to another component. It's better
Just
if yeah,
pure navigation rather than
yeah,
passing some. Okay.
yeah. So I can say we are going from one page to another page. Page in a sense of single page application, which is in our case components. So if I go to add employee, now this one we are doing inside HTML using the router link attribute, and here we are doing it using TypeScript using the router class navigate function. If I click on back, you see the URL has been updated, and I am back to the employee page. So,
Salim,
yep.
uh, can we use history dot go back kind of scripting inside here instead of using a proper navigation link?
I didn't understood. Can you repeat your question?
Usually in the JavaScript, right? If we want to go back, we
Mm-hmm.
use a JavaScript function history dot go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Previously, so can we mingle that pure JavaScript here?
Uh,
Just asking, just curious.
Actually, what happens is that when we use TypeScript, if we want to use JavaScript, we can use JavaScript here, but we usually don't do it in because TypeScript will give you everything you need, almost
Okay.
everything you need. But history, the JavaScript function that you are mentioning, does it do physical routing? I believe it does physical routing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it goes to a physical page.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here we don't have any physical page, so I'm not sure that Angular will be able to support that.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that's a good. I
It
have
would work, but it would just send you back to whatever page you were on before you came to the home employee page or whatever, it would navigate the browser back, I believe.
if it updates the URL, if we write a
Yeah, I
simple
think so.
JavaScript function where we are saying that just update the URL, then Angular router module will look into the URL and will take you back to that page. But if it's like sending you like a hyperlink, uh, and if our browser URL is updated, then it will work, but not sure how that JavaScript function works.
So, Samir, is there any way to take control of the back button at the top with
This one?
Angular?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
back button, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There are lots of tricks where we can disable this or yeah.
Is it with the help of router module, or how is it going
No,
to
it's
work?
it's not built in into Angular as far as I know. We had
Okay.
to just the way we do in JavaScript or something like that. We'll have to do it writing some TypeScript function, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So coming back to our
Hey, Samir, quick question. Uh, I see means routing. I can this using div hide. That's what I see means. Can you give me some practical example if I missed something?
what hide? I didn't get you.
So when I click on button, I can show and hide the div, and I can have whole things inside my div.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose for routing? Can you give me some practical example
Yes.
that
So
your team might be working on?
yeah,
Yeah,
yes. So
navigation from one view to another view, right?
yes,
Yeah.
a practical app means your application will have multiple pages, right? You have say one component that deals with product, and there is customers, and there is orders, and there is something else. So you have to go from product to customer component. You don't want to show everything inside one component, right? Because you at the end of the day you have to also work with the code behind.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to put products in one component and then also the logic handling your services of customers inside that same component.
Okay. So
It's
basically,
Yes.
yeah, Satya. Yeah, Satya. Go ahead.
So if you think about our left navigation links, all those links should be dealt
Uh-huh.
with the router module, right? Router links.
yes.
So Satya, we will not go to server in that case.
Yeah, we would not.
Wow.
But
So,
if that component involves retrieving data from server, it might make a REST API call.
okay, I see. Okay, a component will work behind the scene.
Yeah. So, for
Okay,
example, if you're traversing to a search criteria page, it might not do any backend calls. But if it is to show some data from the backend, it might have made a REST API call behind the scenes.
okay, it makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Satya. Yeah, thanks,
One
Sunny.
other practical thing is, suppose we put everything in one page and hide divs and show divs, then we will not be able to distribute the work among the team members. Let's say one person takes care of products, one person is coding for employees and so on. All will be working on the same page. It will be extremely difficult to manage that kind of a scenario.
Yeah, that is a good point too, Samir. Thanks.
Sure. Go ahead, Salim.
Yeah. So coming back to our routes, where when we register routes, we need to do two more additional route registration. So one is for so so this one is for redirecting whenever our page load. Say we want our application to go to the employee component or the employee page, and that's why we set the path as empty, and then we say redirect to. Here we are saying that whenever our application loads, directly land on the employee page, and then path match full, and there is also path match prefix. So I'll just quickly show you the difference in them. So what will happen now is whenever I clicked on just my local host, it takes me to the employee, and since my path match is prefix, so anytime I append my URL with say uh, some ID or anything else, it will fall back to the employee URL. And if I put full here, so it will do the opposite of that, and it will fall back to the root of it. And then moving on, we have another that is for a wildcard route. So by wildcard route, what I mean is that anytime we use anytime some user comes and does something like this and try to find another pages, say sorry, not from employee, from here, it will fall back to the employee page, because here we are setting it as our employee component. But you can think we create a 404 component and we send them to our 404 page here. Okay, so so there is one more concept here, that is passing param values to our component. And to do that, since I'll be passing parameters to my add employee component, what we can do is add another route with the same component, with the same URL. Just at the last, we are saying that we are expecting the ID query parameter, and then we are saying that this will be the same component, add employee component. So now what will happen is, if I say add employee and I say here one, so this one will be passed as a query parameter here. And to work with this values or this variable, what we need to do is in our inside our app component, inside our add employees component, we have to use something called as the activated route. So we have to inject the activated route class into our constructor. We have to import the activated route class, and this is also from the Angular router library. And I'll just quickly show you on my ng on init. So what I'm doing is, okay, I missed, I break it here. Let me quickly copy
So
this.
what is the purpose of activated route? What is the
Yeah,
what does it do?
I'm showing you, Samir.
Okay.
So what it does is that using the activated route parameter param map, and then passing the param callback function. What I'm saying is that if there exists a parameter by name ID, get it, and here I am casting it into a number because it's a string, it's in the URL. What I'm doing here is I'm simply alerting it. So a real world example or use case of this is, say I have add employee and I want to use the same page to update a form. I have a add employee form here, and I want to, whenever there is a parameter value here, I want to go and fetch that record and pre-populate my form. So here it says, so for an example here, I have this tree record. I have an edit button here. On edit button, I use router link to go to add employee and pass a parameter value here. So say I have passed 3 parameter value. Using activated route, I can catch this value and then start working with it. Does it make sense, Samir?
Right. So looks like we are doing some navigation plus interception. Two things we are doing. So in the navigation, it looks at the URL or looks at if certain things are available, and it intercepts it and takes some other actions on it.
Yes, it's handling the query string of the URL. That's what activated route does.
Okay. Okay.
Angular gives us this class to work with the query string of
And
URL.
practically, how is it used? One thing you said is use the same form for updating. Any other ways? Any other scenarios in which we use this feature?
Uh, that's a primary use case, and other than that, we can send data here, but that's usually a bad practice. Like
Okay.
we just
Fine.
use it to work with forms mostly, like 99% of the time. Okay, so yeah. So we have seen how router outlet works, and we have navigated from our code base.
I have a quick question. So the URLs that we are seeing from Angular application, can they be bookmarked and can users can go back to that page directly rather than entering through the main page?
Yes, they can go back, but we have something for securing our Angular application not known as the auth guard. So if we say that this user is not authenticated, is not allowed to view, even if he has bookmark and his token has expired, he won't be able to go there back. He will be redirected to the login page. So
Yeah,
that
but
part, yeah,
okay. But if
yeah,
he
yeah.
has the correct login context already established, he can click on the bookmarks to directly go to those pages, right?
Yes, right. So just
Okay.
to mimic a bookmark, I will open an incognito and I can visit this page.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have any questions regarding routing anymore? Like any doubts or?
I have a question on the Angular archive, what do you call that? Anchor tag.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, use the router link
Route.
instead of, yeah, instead of href. So we don't use href anymore in Angular. Is that right?
Mm, we don't use href in Angular. We are not using href anywhere. We are using just the anchor tag here. We can use button as well here. We'll create a button and pass this. No issues. It will work same way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking, is there any need for href in this?
No, we don't have any href here.
Okay.
It's
I
just
think you
So
just
generally, if
in
you look at,
general purposes, I think is what he's saying, not
no,
in this specific case.
no. We don't need any href to navigate.
I think
We
when the these TypeScripts compiled into the href internally, the router link into href. Maybe if we look at the HTML generated, we can see that probably.
yeah. This here it's rendering it into href. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So now moving on to Angular forms. So we use forms to retrieve and post data to and from our services. And in Angular, there are primarily like two techniques to work with Angular forms. So one is a template driven and one is reactive forms. Now, both of them shares similar concepts. Template driven forms responsibility squarely on the template. That means the form that we create it using mostly HTML, and we just use our component to fetch the data from server and post the data that we get from our template to our services. But in reactive forms, we shift some of the responsibilities to our class. For example, handling the values in our forms, and then setting their values, validations, and all those part of responsibilities we handle in our TypeScript classes, and we keep our HTML very neat and tidy when we work with reactive forms. Now, both the technique uses two main concepts. One is form group and form control. So they look a bit different, but the underlying concept is quite similar. Uh, to start with, template-driven forms. The template-driven forms main functionality is provided the form by forms module. So we have already seen form module before when we used the ng model for two-way binding. So if you look into our app modules, we'll see that we have already imported the forms module. And if you look at the code snippet number 6 here, so what I will do is I'll create a basic form in our add employee add employee components HTML. Like any HTML form in Angular also we need the form tag. But what Angular does is Angular implicitly uses the ng form directive. We don't have to declare ng form directive. Here we are not declaring ng form directive, but we are assigning the values of ng form directive into this form variable, and this variable where we declare using a hash is known as a template variable. Now since this is a template, an HTML template, the variable that we declared in this way is known as the template variable. And what this variable is is doing is it's being assigned the values of ng form directive. So ng form you can think of as a form group. A form group will have multiple form controls. So now to show you more, what I'll do is I'll copy just one control from here. Uh, so I've created a basic div and have a bootstrap class that we added bootstrap just for a little bit of UI. I have created a label and using HTML tag. This should be this should be yeah. This is saying that the label name is first name, and I'm setting the value first name. I'm using a input tag here to get a text box, setting the ID as first name and the name of the control as first name, and using a bootstrap class form control. So if we look at our page, so did I'll just quickly remove this portion from here. And this should have rendered, yeah. So now you can see I have a text box first name here. And I'll just copy this entire section here so that my form is now complete in. So I have a few controls here. There is a first name, last name, age, and there's a checkbox of type is manager, and on the input with the name of bonus. So if I render here, so all of the controls are now rendering in my add employee page. And we have used the ng form directives variable inside our forms. And what we can do is we use template variable to access the form group control and form control data. That's what I did here. I'm using a template variable to access the form groups data, that is ng form directive. And we use HTML5 for validation. So, we may need to say that the first name is required, the last name is required. Age has some conditions, say the minimum age should be this and the maximum should be that. So we can handle it in template driven forms using HTML5 attributes. That is, say if I say it's required, okay, I have jumped ahead a bit. I'll just show you one thing. I will be showing you two-way binding in this form. So in order to do this, what I'll do is the employee type that we created, I'll go to our add employee component and I'll declare that here. And now in my HTML, what I'll do is I'll say, go ahead and use the ng model for two-way binding and bind this to my employee objects first name. So what I'm doing essentially is here I'm declaring an object of employee type and setting the default values so that whenever my form loads, because we are using ng module for two-way binding, we'll get the default value in our form controls. So I'll quickly update this so that all of my controls now have the ng model. And to render our forms value, that is the variable that we declared, this template variable, to render its value on our HTML, what I'm doing is I'm saying get the forms value and use a pipe, and the pipe name is JSON. So what JSON pipe does is it displays the object in a JSON format. So now if you see the HTML page, here you will see that an object is displaying. This is just for debugging purpose. So we have a first name object, last name object, age is manager, and bonus. So if I type anything, you see the first name value is now updated, last name value is being now updated, is manager is true or false, the bonus is being updated. So the form template variable is getting the data from ng forms, ng model, and rendering it here. So when we need a JSON object, when we update our forms, we get the JSON object, and we can use this object to post our data to our backend server using our services. So do we have any question here till now? This is a two-way binding using ng model. Okay, so now we'll move ahead and look into validation. So for debugging purposes, again, I'm using an attribute ng native validate. So in my forms, now we don't use it in uh, real production or any other place to render our validation messages. This is just for debugging purposes, so that you get an idea. And what I'll do is I'll say that my first name is required. So my first name is required, and this is an HTML5 attribute which handles the required condition for us. And if we go back to our page here, and if I click on submit now, you will see now this is Chrome that is handling it. Please fill out this form. This is how the required validation is being handled. And if I go and say, okay, I have another condition, that is the minimum length should be 3. The minimum length should be 3. Just reorganizing it so it's easier to view. And then you will see if I type 2 characters and click on the submit, it will say, it will give the minimum 3 characters exception that you are currently on using 2 characters.
So is Chrome
But
handling that, or is that a Bootstrap thing?
It's Chrome handling that. So if I go,
HTML.
yep,
So if you want to customize that message, what should you do?
that I'll come in a while. This is just to show and give an initial idea how exception handles works using HTML5. Just we will be customizing everything, and Angular does it in a bit of different way. So we'll come to that in a while. And HTML5 gives us lots of validation attributes. There is the required, there is min length, there is max, min. There are lots of them that HTML5 provides. So to move ahead, I'll just update my UI, the HTML file with all the validations that I have created before. So what happens is now I have the min length 3 validation. I have for my age, I have the maximum of 100 and minimum of 1 required. Okay, so coming to the handling of validations part. So Angular has some pre-built classes, validation classes, which uh, it uses to track the control state. So every Angular control has a state that it maintains, and depending on that state, Angular updates the class, and that's the CSS class that we use for validation purposes. So if I quickly show you, so Angular is going ahead and adding these classes. You can see ng touch, ng pristine, and ng invalid. Form control is a class that we added in our HTML. Form control is a class that we added, but Angular goes ahead and add the following classes. Now, Angular gives us 6 classes for validations, and they come in a pair in sense that is ng untouched and ng touched. We have ng pristine and ng dirty, and then we have ng valid and invalid. So valid and invalid states that the control is now in a valid condition. So all the required parameters is now okay. And ng touch and untouch is if the control has been touched, it will change the CSS. Angular will change the CSS class from ng untouched to ng touch. And if the form or the control has been modified, then Angular will go ahead and change the CSS class from ng pristine to ng dirty. So to show you that in a more visual way, what I'll do is I'll create another template variable, and this is again for debugging purposes to show you how the classes, how Angular works with the classes. So I'm creating a template variable by class test. I'm not assigning anything, so it will just Angular will implicitly add the classes here for displaying, and I'll add an h3 tag so that it's little visible. And I'm saying that take the template variable and display the class names that are now assigned to this form. So if you look into our form, the first name control, by default, it has the form control class. Right now it's untouched. So it has the ng untouched class, ng pristine, and ng invalid. So if I go ahead and click on the form and type something, you will see the class has now changed from pristine to dirty, touched to untouched, and it's still it's still valid, but yeah, it's valid because we have typed it. But if we just move out from it, you will see that the ng state is invalid because we have a required field here. We have a required field here, a required attribute, and that's why the Angular is setting its class as ng invalid. Do we have any question for this?
Can you go back to that code that you wrote?
Mhm.
So, how did we get that class test as a variable?
We declared it as a variable, a template
Okay.
variable.
So any HTML input you can convert into a template variable just by giving hash and variable name.
Yes, hash and
Oh.
variable name, and we can assign it by using this equal to. Here we are assigning the properties of ng form, and soon I'll assign a variable of ng model, the model that we are using here. We will also assign the value of ng model to our variable.
So how do you know that class name is a property of that template variable? Are those
Oh,
like standard names that are available?
yeah, you can look into the document. All the classes names are available in Angular document. That's how I knew this.
Okay. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So now the classes itself don't help us much. We can just change the class for UI purposes. But to actually work with validations, what Angular gives us is the ng model properties. So the way Angular constantly look into our form and check the state of the form, whether it has been touched, whether it has been modified, whether the required conditions have met, the way it keeps on changing the class name, in the similar manner, it changes our ng models property. So ng model property, you can think of it as a form control, and ng form is a form group. So the property, there are 6 properties in ng model that corresponds. I misspelled the correspond spell. So that corresponds one to one with the ng classes. That is, without the ng, it has property untouched and touch, and likewise we have pristine and dirty, and valid and invalid. So just in the same way I showed you how the class name gets updated, I'll show you how the models keep updating. So to look into the ng model, I will create a template variable, and assign it the value of the object of ng model. And to show you, I'll just copy this and I'll remove the class test because we no longer have the template variable with us. So here you can see I have a variable name property test where I am assigning or referencing ng model object. And inside the ng model object, we have dirty, pristine, touch, untouched, valid, and invalid. And if you look into our HTML now, here you can see all of them are now displaying. And if I touch it, you will see that now touch is true. I'll refresh it. You'll see the touch property is false of this control, and the untouched property is true. The dirty is false and the pristine is true. So when I touch it, move out. Now the touch is true and the untouched is false. So this way you can know what the state of F control is. And if I type something, you will see that now this form is valid because the required condition has been met, and now it's dirty because we have modified our form. It's no longer in pristine state. When we first land to a form, the pristine is true, the touch is false, and so you will see now the touch is true, and when we modify it, now the pristine is false and dirty is true. Okay, so I'll quickly replace my HTML so that it stays in sync with what I'm doing. Okay. So do you have any questions, like, or you want to know anything about this state? Okay.
Yeah, Salim, actually, I have a question. So we are using farm group, right? This farm group is for to have a number of farms or just one farm with the different controls. Because
So
what we have in our development world is we have almost more than one tab. Let's say the user is entering customer data, employee data, everything in a different tabs, and we have to submit in one shot. So can we achieve that with the farm group, or we have any other property?
uh, so so first of all, a form can have nested forms as well. A form group can have other forms as well. Uh,
Okay.
and to what to the uh, to the problem that you're saying is you have multiple tabs and you are submitting all of the data at one go, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what you can do is you can create an object. So you will have a large object in this case, or a reference object. Other objects are your properties inside your main object. When you fill the first form, you put the data in your object, and at the end, when your object is complete, you do an HTTP post to your backend. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So
So
all the data in different forms will be retained, right? Because I put it under a parent object.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here say all of your tabs are inside this component, and you have a object of employee object. So here you can have something say manager type of manager. So when you complete your uh, form inside the manager tab, your manager data is assigned now here. And in this way, you at the end when you are ready to submit, your employee object should have all the data that you want to do an HTTP post. But since you are working with REST APIs now, means you will be working with APIs, it's a bit better idea to and again it comes to your particular scenario and preferences. What we do is we do small HTTP post. Say your one tab is complete, you can do an HTTP post. But I understand like there may be scenarios where uh, you cannot do HTTP like you cannot do HTTP patches, and you have to submit all the data in a chunk. There you can complete your one object at the last stage, and you can submit it in your HTTP post.
Okay. Actually, right now we are using a session variables and keeping everything in a session, but that doesn't require anymore, right? The Angular will handle the nested forms. Okay, it will keep track of every form, what value it is having, right?
Yes, your object will keep track of it. So if all of your tabs are inside one component, this object will keep track of it. But just because in REST API there is no session, like REST APIs are stateless. So you have to like get your data like right here and then make the HTTP post.
Okay, thank you.
There are a couple of advanced concepts where we handle state, that is NGRX. You might want to look at that. NGRX, Angular, these are for state management, where you have some state, just the concept of sessions in more advanced way. Opened NGRX store. You may want to look in this, but these are pretty advanced topic. Like they are very huge libraries, and you can use them to further enhance your Angular applications.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Salim, you
Yeah.
mentioned that the form data retains. When we change the component, it goes away.
See, if we are using a ng model for two-way binding, where it went. So here, what we are doing is we are using two-way binding with ng model, and I'm saying that the employee object age property display it here. So your question is, if I change my page, will the data go away, right?
Yes. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah. So if you have pre-populated data here, it will not go away. And if you are storing that in a service, so you have to understand the nature of the stateless versus the the s- the state
So
here.
Yeah, the common thing which occurs here is I'm filling the form and uh, mistakenly I clicked on other menu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I clicked on say employees or add employees or I clicked on weather, right? I'm onto that component now, but oh, I filled all 10 fields.
Mm-hmm.
I have to come back here and fill it again. That's the common thing, right?
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. You want to maintain the state of a form, right?
Yes.
Whatever the last state it was. So you can use something like ngrx store, or you can simply update your one of your service. You can have an object in your service, and there you constantly update the data, and whenever you need, you call it in the ng on init. So you can have some logics in ng on init.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, just fetch me the data from here because this form has not been updated yet or submitted yet. But
Okay.
the best way will be to go with ngrx for maintaining your states.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and there are things like local storage, which I don't recommend, like uh, cookies and all.
Okay.
Yeah, so like this, there are concepts like you store the data in the browser,
Hmm.
in the user's browser, and you have like this index dbs and local storage and session storage.
Okay.
If it's not sensitive data, you can store it in your browser, in the user's browser, and fetch it anytime you want. That's also one way to work with states.
Okay. Interesting. So this, but again, means once browser is closed, my data is gone, right?
No, no.
You,
Session storage data will go. Local storage will remain, if I'm not wrong. Because what we do in some scenarios, we store the encrypted token in our user browser as well.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But
Good to know.
try to stay away from the
Yeah.
storage here. You might be introducing some performance issues.
Yes. Yes. Very true. And when you do pull request and all, like our team, we always make sure that we are not using local storage. Like for example, this is some other application where we are using, like it's just a test application. You can see that that application is not running anywhere here, but I can see the mobile number, email, admin, password. So you can be sure that other application can look at the data that you are storing in your end user's browser.
Okay. That's interesting. That's how like uh, apps on our smartphone keep tracks. I believe so much. I think so, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, this is thank you.
yeah. And when we come to security as well,
Yeah,
and
both security and performance are needs to be taken care if you're trying to store something in your browser storage.
encryption, the only thing that you can do genuinely is encryption. Once it's in the user's browser, he can do anything when it comes to your data. So if we are building something which is HIPAA compliant, we will never store anything on uh, a user's browser. Even even if it's encrypted, also I don't know. Uh, Only encrypted and small chunks of data. For example, the token web API, there is when we use open id connect protocols, we don't even store the token as well in browser. So we go ahead and hit our server and say, okay, is this user logged in or not? Okay, it's logged in, then it comes back. But generally, normally we can store encrypted data in our browser. But I stay away from storing anything from the user's browser, on the user browser.
That was good question, Satya. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I forgot where I was. Let me look at the, okay, ng model property. Yeah. So the state has changed. And okay, so now using our ng model property, what we will do is we'll make some changes to our class and make it more required validation. So that it looks like that we are doing validation handling. So what I'll do first is I'll get rid of all the debugging attributes that I used. I'll get rid of all of this. I'll get rid of this ng native validations and anything now. Okay, so what I'll do now is in code snippet number 10, I'm just replacing my first control, the first name control with this. So what we have now is we have the div inside which our label is there. So the label name is first name. We have an input first name. Then we have a class that we assign form control. Then we have a template variable which now reference the ng model. And then we have two-way binding ng model, employee first name. We are saying that this input control is required. The name of this input control is first name. Should go here for better understanding. Okay, and then there is another required validation, that is the min length should be 3. And since we are referencing ng model to first name var attribute variable, now we can say that if our first name var is touched, if the control is touched or it's dirty. So if somebody has clicked on it or somebody has modified it and all the required validations have met and it's and oh sorry and if it's invalid, if the state is invalid, that is the required conditions have not been met, go ahead and change the is valid class. Go ahead and add the is valid class, and we are updating our controls classes using the ng class attribute. So if I just click on it and move out, you will see the control is now updated with a red border. But we have not yet displayed the respective messages when the min length is not and it's required. We'll do it now. And to display the error, what we will do is we'll add a div. Now I'm using div. You can use anything. You can use span to make it look more better or any HTML attributes. I'm just using div because it's easier for me. So I'm using a class of alert and alert danger. This is again bootstrap classes to make it look more like validation, and saying if the form there is the ng model property is touched, if it's touched, and now if it has errors, then go ahead and display this div. So what will happen now is if I click on it, make my form as touched, and since we have not typed anything, the required validation has not been fulfilled, it's still invalid, the div will display now. And now we need to show a particular message. Say, okay, show the message. What I'm saying, I'm taking one more div to just display that first name is required. So this validation was failed. So here I'm saying the ng models property for this control has errors and the error is of required type. Okay, so if now If I click here, come out of it, it says, okay, the first name is required. Go ahead. When I type the first name control, the validation error goes away. And if you look into our HTML, you will see that we have one more requirement here, a required validation, that is, it should be of min length 3. Now to display that condition, we just need to repeat what we did. We need to say, okay, have and diff will only show the diff if the model's property, the form's property has error and is of type min length, and will display min length is 3. The min length required is 3. Okay. And something went wrong because, okay. Now what will happen if I type one character, I'll see that the min length required is 3. So now this validation is fired. The second validation is fired because the min length validation has not been fulfilled. The require was fulfilled. Okay, and to move on, do you have any questions regarding this validations?
So, you have used dot required dot min length syntax, right? So do they correspond to the HTML
5
validation?
validations. Yes,
Sorry?
they correspond to HTML5 validations.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons where we move from template driven forms to reactive forms, because reactive forms gives us more control. We can go to the extent of creating custom validations and everything. And now you can see the HTML is it's getting bigger and bigger in the sense that we have lots of things going on in HTML. In reactive forms, we get the control. We bring few things out of HTML and we start doing the forms in TypeScript code. So that's why the norm, the general norm or the standard is to build your forms using reactive forms, not uh, template forms. But to get a better understanding of reactive forms, we have to know how template forms work. And there are scenarios where template forms also come handies. So, but and the standard is everyone uses reactive forms to build Angular forms. Okay, we have worked with template variables, submitting our forms. Okay, yeah. So next, what I'll do is I'll just update it because I may have few of the no. Okay. So I'll just remove all of this for now. Next, we'll see how do we submit a form. So we have this form, but we need somewhere to send this form data to our component TypeScript class. And to do that, what we do is in our form tag, we use a event that Angular provides, and the name of that event is ng submit. And we say that we'll handle this event with our function on submit, and we are passing our template variable as a parameter to on submit. And we have to write the function in our TypeScript code. And for now, here we said we will be passing the template variable form which is referencing ng form, and therefore our required parameter, the parameter that we are expecting is of type ng form, and we have imported ng form from Angular Forms library. And for now, what I'm doing, I'm just checking if the form that we submitted is valid or invalid. So in real world scenario, what we do is, if we are not disabling our button, if our form is not valid, so here what we can do is, here we can say we will add an Angular attribute disabled, and we'll say keep this button disabled if the form is not valid. Or should it be the other way? So now the button is disabled. But if you don't want to disable your form in this, your submit button in this manner, what we can do is, here we can say that if form dot valid is not true, we can just return, and we can show messages or something. From here we can update our HTML with some message for the user. So now I'll just remove this disabled for now. Not sure why my button is this. So my button uses PTN primary. Okay. 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 So I think previously we updated our CSS of our button. So now it's green. So for submitting, you will see that this button is not calling any function from our TypeScript class. So our form will have buttons here. Our forms will have buttons here, and the main submit ng submit event will handle the submit button here. And if you need other buttons, for example, go back or clear the form, we can add them outside our forms as well. So now if I go into my page, fill my form so that I don't have any validation error. And if I look into my console, it says that on submit is true. That means the state of our form is valid. So next, I will hook this form with our API service that we created yesterday, the service class that we built yesterday. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Okay.
Hey, Salim.
Yep.
I think this is question for all team here, all team members. Most of the times, right, we put the customized property files where we want to put the label as we can change it on the fly. Same way, error messages also we have common properties file where we put all the error message and we refer to key on the UI. Is
Mhm.
that something?
Are you saying something like this by you said label, right?
Yeah.
So are you saying something this like this, the last name, say I'm changing the last name property label as well.
No, no. Okay. If you go back to HTML page there,
Here?
the HTML
Uh,
page, no, on editor.
mhm.
So here the labels, yeah, you are hard coding here, right? Last name.
An
No,
example would be
I'm
what if
just
you want to do internationalization of labels? Like, how do you pull that out of a properties file?
mm,
That's what you're
you
saying,
want
right,
to.
Deepak?
Yes. Again, Gerard, it's like the error messages, right? We are putting in properties file, so we don't have to deploy the code if something changes in the error message. So if the user uh, doesn't
Okay.
like that,
If you still need to deploy the application, right? If you change the properties file, it can be taken directly.
So let me just uh, for error messages, you have a collection of errors. That's what you're saying, right?
he,
And depending on conditions, those errors are displayed, right?
yes.
Yes.
So
So
here
so
in this,
so
okay,
so build
go,
build a endpoint in your API. You have
okay,
some conditions. Call that
okay,
condition. So
uh-huh,
when you get this exception, call that
uh-huh,
API, get the message, and display it there. Or you can have a TypeScript file which just have all those files here. Uh, the way this constant is the routes collection.
okay,
You can have error collection here, but
okay,
if you don't want to redeploy your Angular application anytime, you can have a config. You can have it in a configuration file, and that configuration file can be accessed via your API. That means the configuration file is in your Java server. There is an endpoint. You call it, get all the errors.
okay,
So there are lots of ways that you can solve
okay.
them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And Satya, I mean is like we need to deploy, but we don't need to build. I think that's what I was pointing out.
Okay.
Yeah, but Salim has a good idea. I mean, so we can have API which goes and retrieves the error messages.
Yeah, but
Yeah, let's see. When we build applications, we'll figure out like how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
but I'll just say one thing.
Mhm.
Very mature Angular, most of the problems we face has already been solved. So,
Okay.
like because Angular is mostly used for enterprise applications, the application, the very likely the application that you guys will be building, that's where we use it because .NET also have that background of where our ASPX pages and web forms,
Yeah.
most of them are now migrating to Angular. So even I have migrated some enterprise level applications using Angular, and most
Uh-huh.
of the problems have been solved. And there are ideas and solutions out there. You just need to Google, and you will find lots of them how others have solved it. So,
Sure. Makes sense. Yep.
so when building enterprise applications, no, I think you won't find much problem as such when it comes to other frameworks. And at the end
Okay.
of the day, we can solve lots of issues by just putting them in APIs.
Uh-huh. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so so I just got lost. Okay, we have submitted. We have seen how submit a form works. We need to go and connect with our backend service. So to do that, what we'll need to do is first using the activated route, that is the query string parameter, I'll go ahead and fetch the data from my API to pre-populate our form. Uh, so if I go to my add employees CSS, I'm just replacing the ng on in it, and I'll need message variable here. Okay. 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 So I'll need to inject our employee service private EMPMO service employee service. Okay. And then I think everything should be okay, good. Okay. So last time when we build our service, there was one small issue or small mistake that I made, and that is in my employee service when we are going and get employee by ID, we are returning an array, which is not correct because the API will be sending us only one JSON object instead of an array of JSON objects. So now our component ng on init should be able to load, and I'll just hide this for now. So this is a variable that I wanted to set and said that, okay, if the query string parameter is greater than 0, that means we are now going into an edit mode. And that means whenever the user clicks submit, instead of calling HTTP post, go ahead and call HTTP put. But I think we are already but I then realized that my API don't have a put method yet, so I won't be able to show you the update of HTTP post. But it's similar how we do HTTP post. The HTTP put is similar. We are just updating the data in our API, and then okay. So now what this should do is if I put a queries parameter here, say 1, this should go into my API and bring the first record and populate it. So here you can see I have Peter Griffin here, and he is a manager. If you go to employee, this is coming from our API. So Peter Griffin is populated. So if I press 2, so Mac is now loaded. So yeah, on ng-init, we are checking our activated route, casting the query string parameter from string to a number. And here I am using let keyword. So in TypeScript, let keyword means that this ID is only scope for this function. Never use the var keyword in TypeScript. I just hated keyword. So if ID is greater than 0, then we are going ahead and fetching the get employees by ID. And then we are saying that populate our objects properties with what our API is returning back. So our HTTP response body, we're populating it. Then now what we need to do on ng on submit, we need to post our data to our API. So again, this is very easy now since we have our service already built. We just need to call our HTTP post method. So this on submit, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and call our services add employee method. We will pass the value of the form because if you remember, the value is the object and the object is of type iEmployee, and our service expects iEmployee and our API endpoint expects iEmployee. So if I now just go ahead and post this, say I say so because I don't have a HTTP put, this will go and do HTTP post. And I'll say Glenn is a manager and I'll do submit. So as soon as I did submit, my API has been updated and I got the data back. And I just redirected the page to employees. Here you can see I'm hitting the go back method that we created in the start. And this is how we do, this is how we hook up our template driven form with our API. I had couple of more things, but it seems we are out of time today. So this is what I'll do next is basically I'll look into reactive forms, and the template form that we created will convert the template form to reactive forms. So just to give you an idea, just like template forms, reactive forms also work with form groups and form controls. And uh, uh, just to ask you everyone, can I continue for like 10-15 minutes? Uh, or
Most of us have many of us have a meeting in 7 minutes.
okay then
Yeah.
I'll complete the reactive forms on Monday when we discuss the securing Angular applications.
Yeah, that'll be better.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so it's a wrap for today and for this week. Thank you everyone for joining. Do feel free to give us your feedback. Send us an email on things that you would like to see, things that are working, not working for you. And we'll stay back. Salim and I will stay on the call. If you still have any questions, just hang around and you can ask them. Yeah.
I have one quick question, Salim, if you don't mind. In your agenda, do you have covered, like, how you showed how to navigate back and forth between two components right now, right? Like how to use the back button. Do you have like the best practice to uh, pass the model between two components when you go back? Like, in this case, when you're just navigating back, but if there is a model that we need to pass, like let's say the employee from one
Mhm.
component to another component, and then when you hit back, then you go back to the previous component. How do you save that state? Like how do you pass that state from when you click on back? Do you have that covered in your agenda?
I haven't shown you, but to give you an idea, say like I have this employee object, right? You are in one
Yeah,
component.
we don't need to do it right now, but like, on just I
No,
was
no,
just curious.
I'll show you. No issues. I can show you that by code. But just to give you an idea, you have component A. You are going to component B. Just populate
One
F2
second.
property.
Sorry to interrupt, Salim. So for the rest who are not able to stay back, please feel to conclude this session and you can disconnect at your own leisure. Yeah.
All right.
But
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
stay
Have a
in.
good
Yeah.
weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Okay. Have a good weekend,
Go
guys.
ahead. Go ahead, Salim.
Yeah. So what I was saying, say I am at add employee component, and I am going to navigate from add employee to employee component. Okay. And I want to share some data from one component to the other, say add employee to employee. While I leave from add employee, say in our scenario, it will be the go back button. So
Right.
from go back button, I'll say go ahead and call the following method in my employee service. But this will not be employee service. You will create another class, another service, and then you will say, okay, set my value, set my
Or
value
you can,
function.
or can you not use event emitter to pass the data?
See, event emitter is when we work from child component to the parent component, or the better term will be from the container to the nested component, and that is
Okay.
to handle events. So you
Okay.
said that my child component has some custom events, and that custom event will return you back data. I believe when you create a Java class, you have properties, you have behaviors, and depending on that behaviors, you can create some events, right? In Java.
Mm-hmm.
In .NET, we create it using delegates. And I believe in Java also we can create event. And if you have used some libraries, you can, you see now you have on order submitted event, or say on in HTML or in jQuery you have on click events. So the same thing.
I think we have only 2 more minutes to drop off to a different call. So in this case, you are just using an internal service and then setting that value, and in the constructor of the other component, you're just gonna catch that value and then
Yeah,
use it,
I'm just
right?
gonna call that value and get the value.
Okay, that's how I think I'm using it right now. I just wanted a confirmation on best practice. Thank you. I think that answers my question.
Yeah, but for proper state management, you have to use NGRX. That's an advanced library. You can look into it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's it, Samir.
Okay, thank you everyone for your participation and joining the session today. We will see you again on Monday.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Happy
Have a
weekend.
good day. Yeah.
Thanks,
And
everybody.